Good morning, everyone. This is Michele Hughes from Ageless and Timeless. Today, I have a guest that I've been talking to for probably 9 months, but I've known about him for a couple of years. His name is Dr. Dale Bredesen, and everybody that's into the ending of Alzheimer's knows him because he had a New York Times bestselling book, which I have right here. The End of Alzheimer's, and oops, I don't know if I'm doing this right. Is it in this? Is it in the video?
A little to your right.
A little to the. Oh, there
There
we
you
go.
go. Now you
There
can
we
see it.
go. The End of Alzheimer's. Is that it, Tony?
Yeah.
Good.
That's it.
Okay. So Dale, welcome. I'm so happy to have you here, and I've been watching some of your podcasts on the internet, and one thing I have to say right up front is you are truly on a mission. And you're one of the most dedicated and most passionate, but in a very subtle way. I mean, you don't wear it on your sleeve, but you are truly a pioneer, and you are truly doing something that is at the cutting edge. And I will tell everybody right up front, the first thing that Dale said to me after our Get Acquainted call that shocked me was he said, Michele, we will be the last generation of people who will look at Alzheimer's as a incurable disease. Well, that coming from probably one of the most disastrous records in history of medicine for any disease is a bold statement, to say the least. So Dale, why don't you just start off and tell us what is it that makes you so courageous to make a statement like that? Why do you think that can be?
Yeah, that's a really good point, Michele, and thanks for having me on. In fact, we have here. So here's the new book, which is called The Ageless Brain, which just became a New York Times bestseller yesterday.
How great!
So happy
I've
about
got to
that.
read that.
So I'll get you a copy of that.
Thank you. Well, we are neighbors, so it's only a little postage
Not too
too
far away.
from Nevada to Tiburon.
Right. So what's changed dramatically during my career, and I've been doing this now for 50 years. I'm in my 70s, so this has been a lifelong passion, as you said. When we started out, we were told there's nothing you can do. There is nothing that will prevent, reverse, or delay cognitive decline. In fact, some of the old work from thousands of years ago, Pythagoras pointed out, dementia and what happens to people as they get older. Marcus Aurelius talked about what happens to people as they get older. And until just the work that we've been doing over the last 10 years, that was the thought. There's nothing that you can do as you get a little older, your mind slips, and for many people, they can look forward to dementia. But as you pointed out, I did indeed say, ours is the last generation that will fear Alzheimer's, because for the younger generations now, what do they have? They have so many things that we did not have. Number one, there are new blood tests now. There's something called BrainScan, which gives you a p-tau 217, GFAP, and NFL. That's three tests that literally look inside your brain and tell you, are you on the way to that problem? And that there's a lot you can do about it now. We have labs. You can look to see what's driving it like never before. We can determine what is driving whether it's you've got a little brain fog, whether it's that you're really having trouble with your memory, or you're having trouble recognizing faces, or getting lost driving, or remembering your keys, or any of these sorts of things. We can now determine what's causing that problem, and it's often multiple things. And of course, COVID has been one of the things that has contributed to so many people having brain fog. But it's also the California fires, air pollution, leaky gut, changes in oral microbiome. There are dozens and dozens of things, chronic infections that people can be unaware of, exposure to various toxins that they're unaware of. We can ferret these out. We can identify and address them like never before. And we have such spectacular results with prevention and reversal of cognitive decline. We were the first to publish that back in 2014. We're now in the middle of a randomized controlled trial at 6 sites around the country. And this will be completed in October of this year. We have interim analysis to see where we stand here. We're now about 2/3 of the way through. And the results are really exciting. So we're seeing statistically significant benefit for people who are doing the right things, and the people who are on standard of care are actually going downhill instead of uphill, as we know. So this really is a new era, like never before. We understand and we can do something about this so that we're getting to the point that we can tell people, look, this is really an optional problem. If you start early, get on active prevention or early treatment, you can do very, very well. And that was the point of the book, The Ageless Brain. Let's, for all of us, whether you're headed for Alzheimer's or not, let's optimize our performance and our protection of our brains. Because whether you're 20s or 90s or anywhere in between, your most important asset is a functional brain.
Mm-hmm. You know, it's interesting because that little 3 pounds does the work of, like you said, 2,000 computers.
Yeah.
And people just take it for granted when they're young. And I think even as we get older, you know, we're told to get our lipids checked, we're told to get our hormones checked, you know, all these things that we have to take responsibility for, but we're never told to go get our brain checked. So how do you make this paradigm shift to get people from being the creatures of habit, you know, and as David Perlmutter quoted, and I think it was originally an Einstein quote, that, you know, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. Well, you know, we've been led to believe that we can kind of ignore the brain until it's too late.
Yes.
How do we change that paradigm, Dr. Bredesen?
Yeah, isn't that interesting? That's so important. And it stems from the fact that people thought there was nothing you could do about it, so they didn't bother to check. So in fact, still, mainstream medicine will say, don't bother to check your ApoE status, your genetics,
Mm-hmm.
because there's nothing you can do about it. If you've got an increased risk for Alzheimer's, there's nothing you can do about it. Well, that's absolutely wrong. And
Mm-hmm.
in fact, people are doing something about it all the time. So, you know, Michele, the very first person that I treated who got better was in April of 2012. And
Wow.
she came out from Washington, D.C. She'd been having problems, and she was actually considering committing suicide because her doctor had already said, you've got early Alzheimer's. Her mother had died of it. She had watched her mother in the nursing home. It was really sad to see. And so she was actually saving pills to kill herself. She came out and she was 67 then. She's done absolutely great. She's about to turn 81. And she is now starting, by the way, she's a brain health coach now. And she is starting on April 5th a walk across the United States to bring attention to the fact that there is a lot you can do about brain health and about prevention and reversal of cognitive decline. And she's been doing it for 13 years now. So she's going to be walking. She's done 100-mile bike rides and she's done marathons. She's amazing. And she's going to begin to walk from San Diego to St. Augustine, Florida.
Oh, that's
We'll see. You
incredible.
know, it's going to be, that's a long way to walk, 3,500 miles, as it turns
She
out.
sounds, is this patient zero from your book?
Patient zero,
Yeah.
Judy. And so, in fact, you can look, there's a website, Judy Walks, and you can see you can see her, where she's going and where she is at each stage of the game. I think it's a wonderful story. But as you said, you know, we need people to know about this now. We need
Yeah.
people to understand, because so many times the doctor will just say, you're getting a little older. It's just what
Yeah.
you'd expect. And that is absolutely wrong.
Right. Well, you're obviously at the forefront of doing that, as is Dr. Perlmutter, being such a big believer and being also, you know, an expert in brain health. So
Yeah.
I have to tell you that although Ageless and Timeless is only 6 years old, and that's, you know, that's a pretty good run for a podcast, but I from the very beginning had a mission to educate people about brain health. I always felt the mission was to help people, generally speaking, that to, you know, take charge of their health. But I always felt like the problem of seeing people, you know, deteriorate from this horrendous disease. And by the way, my husband, I think I told you this, my husband was a football player, and he
Yeah.
developed Parkinson's without any genetics and
Right.
any agree. So I'm very close to, this subject, and it's near and dear to my heart when I hear stories like Judy, what she's doing, because I think this is all about, it's just like taking anything that you want to create brand awareness.
Yeah.
This is like a brand, curing Alzheimer's, the end of Alzheimer's. And now how do we get that awareness out to people? And it's like baby steps, you don't seem to have these huge paradigms. Certainly you and your books have helped tremendously, and all your podcast lectures and your lectures around the country. And in fact, I looked at Apollo Health, and Deborah Geisler is going to be on my podcast.
Yeah. Good.
I think in 2 weeks or 3 weeks.
Great.
So, and she's one of the founders with you of Gray Matters.
Right.
So let's take a little deeper dive. Back up a little bit. What is Alzheimer's, and how do you differentiate Alzheimer's from these other mental brain disorders?
Are you ready to transform your health and wellness? Join us April 25th to 27th in Dallas, Texas, at the Hilton Granite Park for the 2025 Changing Life and Destiny Conference, the event of the year for those passionate about moving our healthcare system to a preventative and proactive model. Explore 40-plus masterclasses and discover 100 cutting-edge health technologies that are shaping the future of wellness. Learn from renowned experts like Dr. Fab Mancini, Dr. Dan Pompa, and Dr. Sandra Rose Michael, and take home powerful strategies to enhance your life and practice. Whether you're looking to boost your health, explore the latest in functional medicine, or connect with like-minded individuals, this event has something for everyone.
Yeah, this is a good point. So Alzheimer's was defined as a pathology. So Dr. Alzheimer, way back in 1906, so over 100 years ago, had a patient who died, who actually got demented in her 50s, quite demented, and passed away, and looked in the brain, and at that time saw the hallmarks. By the way, another doctor, Dr. Oscar Fisher, right around the same time, also showed the same pathology. So, it's called Alzheimer's. It should probably be called Alzheimer-Fisher disease, because they both did superb and very important work to define this. And you could see these amyloid plaques. So it looks a little bit like a drop of maple syrup on the brain. You see these drops around, and they are outside the cells mostly. Mm-hmm. And then he saw also these shrunken neurons with these tangled structures that he called neurofibrillary tangles, what they became called neurofibrillary tangles. And it's turned out that these are associated with specific proteins. So those drops of syrup, the amyloid plaques, have turned out to be a little peptide called beta amyloid. And so for years, it was thought that's what's causing the problem. We now know that what happens is this is your brain's response to being attacked by various microbes and various things. So what happens is you have insults to your brain, and your body is trying, just as if you would get an abscess in your tooth. You've got organisms there, but your body is making all those white cells that are what's making the abscess. Mm-hmm. They're doing it because they're trying to help you. They're not there to hurt you. Mm-hmm. It's the same idea with the amyloid. And then the one that these neurofibrillary tangles, these are composed largely of what's called phospho-tau. And this is a fascinating story, because tau is a molecule that is a normal brain molecule. And what it does is it bolts down your microtubules. So you have these microtubules that are part of the structure of your brain cells. Mm-hmm. So when you're growing these things and reaching out and making new contacts and keeping memory, just like putting an addition on your house, you need to have the bolts, the structure, to keep that strong. Mm-hmm. Now, what we've found in the research is that your body, literally just the way it goes from sleep to wakefulness, and whole sort of things change in going from sleep to wakefulness, you also go from connection mode to protection mode. Mm-hmm. So when things are good, you are putting your resources into connection. So your tau is bolting down these things you're making and keeping these structures. When you've got inflammation, when you've got organisms there, when you've got toxin exposure, all these sorts of things, your brain literally switches from connection mode to protection mode. When it does that, your tau is phosphorylated. So you add phosphorus and oxygen to your tau. And what it does is it changes the charge and the shape. So it pops off. Unfortunately, that allows your neurites to collapse again, but it now goes and it kills bacteria. So it's literally becoming an antimicrobial protein. And by the way, your amyloid is an antimicrobial peptide, a short piece of a protein. So it's clear that when you get this problem, you are responding to insults. And as you implied there is an intimate relationship between brain aging and Alzheimer's. And people have always argued, is it separate? Is it the same? What's going on here? Well, it turns out it is closely related. That's why it's hard to separate the two. So you do get this amyloid in your tau for many people as they age, but you may not have dementia. This is why it's so important for everyone to get evaluated. And by the way, I just had my own test done. So everyone should know what we call BrainScan. It's a blood test for p-tau, it's called p-tau 217 because it's the one that correlates best. GFAP, which tells you whether there's inflammation in your brain, and then NFL, which tells you if there's damage to your neurons. These are three complementary tests that are absolutely critical, and you get a little report that will show you. So you can go to getabrainscan.com. You can actually have it drawn. I had it drawn in my kitchen. You can do it with mobile phlebotomy. You can do it by going to a local draw station. Lots of ways to get this done. So it's a very helpful test. And so for the first time, we can look without having to do a spinal tap. We can look inside your brain with a simple blood test, see where you stand, and then we can address the things that are actually causing the decline. So Alzheimer's is a pathology, but it's been argued about what actually causes that. When you get it, by the way, you go through 4 phases. So you actually have a long time where you can prevent and reverse this problem. Phase 1, asymptomatic. You don't know you have problems, which is why early testing is so important. Phase 2, SCI, subjective cognitive impairment. By definition, you notice something's not quite right, but you're still able to score normally on cognitive testing. Phase 3 is MCI, mild cognitive impairment, where now you are struggling on the test, but you're still able to care for yourself. And phase 4, unfortunately, dementia, where now you're having trouble with your activities of daily living. We find that in the first 2 phases, we can get 100% of the people to do very well. Phase 3 in our trial, 84% of the people improved, but some of them improved a lot, some of them improved a little. And phase 4, the dementia, we do see people improve, but it's hard to bring them all the way back to normal, which is why, again, we want people get in early, get checked early. Let's make sure you never get to those phases 3 and 4.
So do you need a doctor's prescription to do the getabrainscan.com?
No. So one of the things that we're involved in is trying to make this more available for everybody. Make it so people can get appropriate labs. And then you can get a brain health coach. You can find a doctor who's been trained. We've trained over 2,000 physicians all over the world and all over the US to be able to do this. And we do see big differences between people who are trained and who know what they're doing and people who haven't been trained, so that you can get very good outcomes for many doctors. So yeah, you don't have to have your doctor do this. You can get this online easily. And so we want to make this available so everybody can have the best chance of good outcomes in their cognition.
And isn't this what Gray Matters is trying to do with respect to spreading, or expanding into different cities so that people can actually go to a physical location?
Yes, and because there are so many people that, they go to their doctor and the doctor says, well, I don't know about this. I don't know how to do it. I don't know what to look for. And I'll just tell you the standard line is, the party line is there's nothing you can do about it. So, so they don't believe it. So Gray Matters as you mentioned, founded by Deborah Geisler and Craig Weston and Howard Bird and myself, is to spread clinics around the country to say there is something you can do about it. We see it again and again. We've published trials showing that you can improve, and everybody should have access to best cerebral care. And Deb has been fantastic. She has a long history with healthcare at Harvard and has done a great job in setting this up.
So what's the vision? Right now they're only in Florida, correct? And they have
Correct.
three locations.
Right. So the vision is to have clinics all around the country that will make it so that people can get on prevention and active, and active treatment. And you can do that today through Apollo and through getting someone who has been trained. That's I think the best way to go. But there's not yet these standardized clinics where you can know here's someone that's been trained.
Right.
So best thing right now, you can definitely get the brain scan, get the blood test and look, and it will tell you, and then get a good practitioner who has been trained. We hope that there will be clinics around the country at some point to help you do that. And now in Florida, Dr. Nields is a doctor there who's doing an excellent job with patients.
So, but there's one thing, if you can go get the tests on your own without a doctor, but somebody has to interpret the results. Right?
So there is a report that actually interprets the results for you. And then there's also, there's a number you can call up and you can get further discussion. You can get so all the things that you need, you can get.
Okay.
We want to make this so it's easily available to everyone.
Right. But you don't see patients, but yet you had these, 84% of these, and those 7 people that wrote the second book. So obviously you did treat, you made some exceptions. When do you make an exception to actually take care of a patient?
Yeah. So, I saw patients for years.
Right.
But then I ran a laboratory for years so that we could study the basic aspects. So the idea is we went into the lab with the idea that there was nothing at that time. This is now started my first lab in 1989. And so there was nothing that could be offered to anybody. So I thought it doesn't help me to tell people there's nothing that I can offer you. So the idea was to go into the lab, study this at the most basic level, see if we could understand the process well enough to begin to fashion the first effective treatments. We did that. And so I actually did see patient 0, and I've seen a number of patients since then. But I'm no longer again, as I said, I'm in my 70s now. I'm no longer a clinically practicing physician. So now I'm a teacher. So we have taught all these people how to do this, and many of them are doing a fabulous job. We're developing new tests, and I'm involved with that, looking at what can we do better. How can we do it less invasively? How can we do all the things that are needed? What are the tests that are working? What are not working? What are the treatments that are working? There's a lot of junk out there, as you know. People will say, oh, you just take my crystal and put it on your forehead, everything's going to be fine. No, we want to know the things that are actually scientifically validated and working.
Right.
That's why I'm not seeing many people these days.
So do you have a database of the 2,000 people you've trained so that people can look at their geographic location and find someone that's a specialist and has learned through your training?
Yeah, and in fact, the easiest way to get onto that is to go to my CQ test. So CQ is cognitive quotient. So MyCQ test. Yeah. That gives you a free online cognitive assessment.
Yeah.
You can then look and see where do I stand? Because this does sneak up on you, as you know, some changes in your cognitive abilities. You can do that, and it also will help you get the appropriate tests and tell you where are the trained practitioners.
Somebody's trying to call in, so you just put it up into a little box. So hold on just a sec. I'm sure you're going to come back as soon as that call goes away. Okay. There we go. Okay, we're back. Okay, so that's really good. This is, one of the things I wanted to do in today's podcast is have practical information for people to be proactive, that they get inspired by what they learn, or if they just read your book, 2017, that's 7 years ago, 8 years ago. What has changed in the 8 years that you want to share with us?
Yeah, really good point. So in the 8 years since the first book came out, this is why I wrote the new one, The Ageless Brain. And so number one, we've never had these blood tests before. So this one that I mentioned, BrainScan. That's never been available before, so that you didn't really know. You had to have a spinal tap or you had to have a very expensive PET scan instead of just a simple blood test. So to me, that is a huge step in the right direction. And you can also use that to follow where you stand as you get better. The second thing, when we first came out with this back in 2017, we had anecdotal improvements, but we didn't have a clinical trial. There are now 3 clinical trials, all showing, 2 of them already published. The next one will be published later this year, all showing the same thing: improvement when you address these things that are driving the problem. The third thing is we understand much more now about the drivers of the disease. We had the 36 holes before, we were looking at all these different pieces. We now know that they all come in just a couple of groups, so we can look for them better and we can address them better. We know more things like EWOT, which I didn't know about way back when, which is exercise with oxygen therapy.
Yeah.
It's actually quite helpful for people because it gives you this double positive. You've got better blood flow with better oxygenation.
Yeah.
We know a lot more about how to achieve best outcomes. We know more about some of the pathogens that can be involved with this. So we have a better and better chance to produce this. Also in 2017, we didn't have any examples of long-term improvement because we hadn't been doing it long enough. We've now published a paper. It's freely available online. That shows sustained improvement in people for over a decade. As I mentioned, first patient came in 2012, so she's now 13 years out. She's doing great. So we now know about long-term outcomes. We've now begun to modify this and use it for other neurodegenerative conditions. We have some good results with Lewy body disease, which is often mistaken for Alzheimer's disease. We have some beginning good results with macular degeneration. We have some beginning results with Parkinson's. So there are other things that as we understand the process better, we can do better and better for outcomes. We now have a much bigger group of people who've been trained to do this. But there's still a lot more to do. We need to understand how to make this as simple as possible, as accessible as possible, as effective as possible. And, one of the big problems has been mainstream medicine saying, hey, what are you talking about? We know you can't do this. It's interesting to me. When you have something that hasn't been done before, people will literally deny data. It's data.
Well,
so we do have to get the word out.
If it makes you feel any better, I was on the board of Dr. Barry Sears and Dr. Stephen Sinatra. I don't know if you know them, but Barry Sears was really the father of inflammation, of the concept of inflammation. And he developed the zone diet, and he and Dr. Sinatra, who was a big famous cardiologist, wanted to expand by creating these little zone cafes.
Interesting.
And they did one prototype in Reno, and it was so successful. Anyway, but the point I'm making, I was on their advisory board because I knew a couple of other people that were involved, and they wanted someone with real estate and a passion for health. Well, couldn't find someone that fit that one as well as I could at that moment, because I was developing real estate all over in many locations, and some of which the locations they wanted. But I remember sitting down with Dr. Sears one day, and he said, it is so frustrating because I know that inflammation is the root cause of so many diseases, but I am getting so much flack from my own medical community. And now I think of you and how you said many of your friends don't even talk to you anymore. So what is it? Why is it that this disease has just basically snookered so many famous brain, I mean, really bright people into thinking that it's a mono cause, basically beta amyloid is the cause. They don't really think beyond and embrace possibilities that are outside of that paradigm. So why do you think there is so much resistance to your actually very credible research and data, like you said?
Yeah. There are a lot of angry people out there. It's so funny. So, 2 centuries ago, in the early 1800s, there was no germ theory. People didn't know about microbes, about bacteria and things like that. But they knew that women were dying. Women in Europe were dying after they had their babies, and they would get infections and die. They didn't realize what it was. And so a young doctor named Dr. Ignaz Semmelweis said, there must be something associated with the fact that the medical students who were delivering the babies worked on cadavers before they would deliver the babies. Oh my God. And so as it turned out, they were carrying infections, unfortunately, from the cadavers. And so many women would die after childbirth with what they called puerperal fever. So he said, look, you guys have to use this solution that he developed for cleansing your hands. And the rate of death from mothers went down. In fact, a couple of months, it was completely zero. Whereas it had been up very, very high, 20, 30, 35% of these people were dying. It was horrible. So he said, okay, there's something in there. I don't know what it is yet, but this was the beginning of what later would become germ theory and Lister and Pasteur and all these people.
Right.
At the time, the doctors who were the quote experts pushed back so hard, he ended up being forced to go into an insane asylum for his ideas, where he died of an infection, ironically.
My God.
We doctors have a horrible track record of coming into the modern times. And it's because, being a doctor is like being in the army. You're told if you don't do what we tell you, someone might die, just like the army. Yeah. So you do what you're told, you don't ask questions. Well, when you have something like Alzheimer's where there's nothing, somebody's got to ask questions. And so you now have to start looking at what's better. Now, to be fair, the data that support Alzheimer's as a mediator, not the cause of the problem, but as an important mediator, are pretty good. I mean, they're very good, actually. And that's because people who have mutations in that gene, the amyloid precursor protein, do go on to get Alzheimer's. So there's no question you can give someone Alzheimer's, which is what they do in the mice, by making a bunch of extra amyloid. But that doesn't say that that's the cause of it in the majority of people. And that's what our research was over the years. What's driving this problem? And you can see that this is literally a network insufficiency. You, just like a big company or a big country, you got all these things that have to work together to get things working. And when you start reducing the energy, reducing the blood flow, reducing the oxygenation, all these things, and now you add more demand, which is inflammation. Now you got to deal with infections, toxicity. Now you got to detox. You lose that. You cannot support the 500 trillion synapses in your brain.
I'm so happy. Yeah. I'm so sorry to interrupt you, but I'm so happy you said that word synapse, because I don't know that everybody understands what a synapse is. Would you define that?
Yeah, absolutely. So the way your brain works, so it's very much like a computer, where you've now got an impulse which is going from one place to another, and then basically making decisions whether you're going to basically yes or no. So a synapse is where the brain cells connect. They come very close. They don't touch. They come very close, and then across that tiny little junction of the synapse, they spray a little neurotransmitter. And so then, depending on the strength of the inputs, you basically will fire the next neuron, or you don't fire it. So it's essentially a way to build a computer. And as you said earlier, it's amazing. We can store in our brains over 2,000 home computers worth of information. So imagine having 2,000 computers in your home. all of that storage capacity is in your brain. So when you are unable to support all of that, you've got to downsize, unfortunately. Just like a company, you do not support it. And when you've got additional demands on it because of infections, inflammation, toxicity, you're also going to have to downsize. And as I said earlier, you're switching your resources from connection to protection. And that's what's happening in Alzheimer's. And if you don't identify it and address it, you just keep downsizing, downsizing, downsizing till you can no longer take care of yourself. So this is a breakthrough in our understanding about what this is all about. And we got to quit saying, well, it's just amyloid. Well, the amyloid is there for a reason. So we're changing the way we think about this from pathology, amyloid, tau, tangles, things like that, to physiology. What is your body doing to try to help you, given the insults it's undergoing? When you do that, it really opens things up.
That is such an important statement that you just made, from pathology to physiology, because APP, as you mentioned in your book, that amyloid is actually the protector. And to get it so wrong, the whole medical establishment has gotten it so wrong and spent how many millions or billions have been spent on this disease?
Well, over $40 billion.
And still no cure.
That's a big mistake. That is an expensive mistake.
And still no cure, except the Bredesen Protocol, which they're ignoring or not willing to embrace. So this is a sad story. And, it kind of reminds me a little bit of your history with the Buck Institute and where it was when I think you were probably the person that was serving, because you were the founding CEO. And that's when I was on their advisory board, was right at the very beginning. So we must have known each other back then, but not really, remembered that. But but I can remember the Buck Institute started out being very allopathic and very much wedded to the pharmaceutical industry. And I don't want to get into the politics, but I remember feeling very uncomfortable. And to your credit, and to Lee Hood and Eric Verdon, both of whom, Lee was supposed to be on my podcast. He will be on, I hope, next year, but Eric has already been on.
Good.
And Eric wants me to interview Dr. Nathan Price. So I'm getting a lot of exposure to the Buck Institute for where they are today. And you were the first and foremost to really start them on that track of embracing something that now we look at with respect to a specific condition called Alzheimer's and other neurodegenerative diseases that actually embraces the very protocol and functional medicine, integrative medicine structure that the Buck Institute basically started to move towards, and over these years has gotten more and more to that level of let's call it away from pathology and more towards physiology. So all that being said, the reason I'm saying it is because I want you to take a deep dive into the functional medicine protocol, which is really the Bredesen Protocol. So let's start with those 7 pillars that are the real causative factors for let's just use Alzheimer's, even though it can be embracing other neurodegenerative diseases.
Yeah, and as I mentioned, we're modifying this to take into account the special situation for each of these different networks. So whether it's Lewy body related or whether it's ALS related or macular degeneration. So so we're all about best outcomes. That's the goal. And so this is why the Institute has moved toward this with people like Lee Hood and Nathan Price. They are experts in this area. So we're looking at all the things, and they're very good with things like metabolomics and as Lee calls it, the phenome. We don't want to just look at the genome. We want to look at the phenome to see where things stand. So we start with, where the brain scan that I mentioned earlier. You're going to get that and look at what's the status of your brain. Then we look at the future. Where are you headed? And that includes things like your homocysteine and your HSCRP and your various toxin burden, all these sorts of things. And then we can fashion a personalized precision medicine protocol for you, which addresses these various things. And as you said, there are 7 basics and there are 2 specifics. And the way this works is the basic things support everybody. The specific things then say, do you have additional things we need to look at? So the 7 basics are this. So interestingly, your diet, everyone thinks diet is not very important. It doesn't really matter what you eat. As a doctor, I was taught diet's not that important.
Right.
That's have to be very incorrect.
Right.
There's so much that can be done. So a plant-rich, mildly ketogenic diet with high fiber, high phytonutrients, very, very important. Arguably the most important of all these things. Healing your gut, making sure that your gut microbiome is good, having enough prebiotic fiber, all this sort of stuff. Exercise, and there's some great things like EWOT that I mentioned, Katsu bands, HIIT. This high intensity increases your BDNF, which we know supports synapse formation and has an anti-Alzheimer effect.
Right.
So that's a very good one. And then the third one is sleep. And I track mine every night. It's a good idea. You want to have sleep each night, at least 7 hours of sleep, at least an hour and a half of REM, at least 1 hour of deep sleep, and at least 94% oxygen saturation. Those 4 parameters, critical. And having good, sleep hygiene is helpful and things like this. And then the 5th thing is brain stimulation. And as you are supporting your brain, you want to stimulate it a little bit and that's with brain training. It can be with photobiomodulation, red light therapy, things like that, very helpful. And then detox, some basic detox for all of us. Sauna, sweating, non-toxic soaps to get rid of that sweat afterwards. Basic detox, clean water, filtered water. These are all very helpful. And as you know, one of the big things that is coming up now is the microplastics. Can't ignore these anymore. It turns out they do collect in your brain more than your liver. They concentrate in your brain more than your liver, more than your kidney. And they are associated. We don't know yet whether it's causal, but they are clearly associated epidemiologically with cognitive decline. Now, you can reduce these with things like plasma exchange. That's expensive. And is everybody going to have to undergo plasma exchange? We've got to look at better and better ways to minimize the microplastics in our brain.
Right. Plasma exchange, if you go to Dr. Darshan Shah at Next Health, it's like $18,000. If you go to Dr. Purita in Florida, he's a lot less, but it's like $4,000 or $5,000. At the A4M, at RadFest, they were actually had someone right on the floor that was doing it, set up their booth and everything, and that was going to be about $6,000. So this is not affordable for everybody, but it is, certainly if you can afford it, to take 4 or 5 liters of your blood out of you and basically reconstitute it with oxygenation, taking out all the toxicity. And they even show you the blood, the color of the blood and how it changes. It's really quite fascinating, but not for everybody. So that I love what you're saying, but I would say that's kind of like for 1% of the population.
That's the issue. And by the way, one of the world's experts on this, who is ahead of all those guys you mentioned, is Dr. Dobry Kiprov, who is right here in Marin County, right in Mill Valley. He and I were both together years ago at UC San Francisco in our training. So he's been doing this for a long time and is very successful and has shown there's some improvement in cognition as well. So these are, this is another issue. So detox. And then the final one is some targeted supplements. These can help to reduce the inflammation you were talking about earlier. And I have met Dr. Stephen Sinatra, so I know his work.
Did you know that he passed away?
No, because I haven't seen him in several years.
I know.
I've interacted with his son as well. So I'm sorry that he passed away.
I know his son too. Yeah.
I met him late in his career, obviously. So, but I think, what he's done and his son has done, very important. We always say, well, you've got to find out also what's causing the inflammation, because you don't want to just reduce the inflammation without knowing what it's doing. It's there for a reason, just like the amyloid. It's there for a reason.
Well, you didn't say the vascular part, but that certainly, and you did say the gut, the brain gut axis, the microbiome. But what about the vascular, and what about the genetics, and what about the hormones? This seems like there's so many potential causative factors. But why don't you talk about those for a moment?
Yeah. So when I said, remember, energetics, inflammation, and toxicity.
Oh, that was.
Yeah. So the vascular is absolutely part of the energetics. So I mentioned you have to have good blood flow, oxygenation, mitochondrial function, and that's where ketone level turns out to be important as well. And insulin sensitivity, metabolic flexibility, as my wife taught me many years ago. She's an outstanding integrative physician, as she taught me many years ago. Metabolic flexibility is very important. So the ability to go seamlessly back and forth between utilizing glucose and utilizing ketones. Our brains are like a Prius. They're like a hybrid. They only run on two things. They run on glucose, they run on ketones. So when you have insulin resistance, you lose both of those. You have a high insulin, you're not using your glucose well, and you're not able to make ketones. Now, you mentioned hormones. Optimizing your hormones also helps that energetic support, helps support the neuronal structure in your brain. So absolutely, these are important as well. So we're getting this to function.
Dale, are there any specific hormones that you would list as the most important for brain health?
Yes, so there are several. Now, as you know, there's a controversy about BHRT, bioidentical hormone replacement therapy, but there are repeated studies coming out showing they do improve brain health. And you talk to an expert like Dr. Anne Hathaway or Dr. Prudence Hall or Dr. Felice Gersh. There are numerous experts, Dr. Roberto Diaz Brinton. All of these people will tell you these do support brain health. And so estradiol, progesterone, testosterone, pregnenolone, these are all important. Thyroid is another important one, to have optimal thyroid. So many of us have low thyroid and have some degree of Hashimoto's. So all of these things are helpful in optimizing our brain health.
And DHEA because of the adrenals.
That's another one. And that's particularly helpful for stress. Yes. Yeah. And part of when we look at the 7 basics, and before we do the 2 specifics of infections and toxins, the 7 specifics do include managing stress. We were meant to be able to survive brief periods of stress with resolution. The problem is chronic, unremitting stress, and that is associated with brain shrinkage, associated with cognitive decline. So we want to avoid that ongoing, which is why, again, a good thing, check your heart rate variability. And you can improve. There's so many things you can do to address stress. Everything from meditation to yoga to dealing with the issues in your life, to things like Shinrin-yoku, the so-called forest bathing, biofeedback. There are all these things, and there's no question they can be very helpful.
And just walking out your front door to, if you're able to, and like we are in California most of the year, and taking a walk in nature is one of the most incredibly mindful activities. Plus, you're getting good exercise.
Exactly.
So, okay, Dale, there's a lot here, as you know, and I'm sure you understand that most people who have not been open-minded because their physicians haven't been open-minded to taking these steps, but you are really embracing the integrative medicine model, which is look for the root cause and don't try to just treat a symptom with a drug. So, I mean, if I could summarize what integrative medicine and functional medicine is compared to allopathic, that would be the first one. You said physiology to, from pathology to physiology, just saying very similar things. But you are embracing so many aspects. So break it down a little bit further for us. Is how do you determine when you have a patient which of all these issues that you've just mentioned are the cause of their particular condition, and how do you be a detective and find the root cause?
Yeah, great point. And we would recommend just take it at your own pace. If you can just begin with a couple of things, you'll notice improvements over time. But to get an optimal outcome, you want to just keep on at your own pace, adding things. Working with a brain health coach, really helpful. They can help you stay on track. So the way we figure out what's wrong is the blood test that I mentioned. So there's the first one that tells you where you stand currently. That's BrainScan. You could get a brainscan.com. Then there's a one that says where are you headed and what's driving it, and those are so-called recode labs, and you can also get those online. You can also get them at a local draw station. It's very easy, and then from that we have a computer-based algorithm that goes through all the things. It used to take me about 2.5 hours per patient to go through every single thing and figure out, okay, here's an optimal plan for you. Now the computer does that, in a few microseconds. So much, much faster. So that's why we made this whole algorithm, so that you can now see what to do here. And it'll tell you based not only on your blood test, but also on some of your symptoms. So for example, people who begin their cognitive change with depression, and we hear this all the time, and they more likely have toxicity as one of the important contributors to their cognitive change. Whereas people who begin it with an amnestic, with a memory issues, tend often to be more on the metabolic and inflammatory side. That's one of hundreds of variables. And so looking at all these different blood tests, we put the whole thing together, the computer crunches it, and then says, okay, here's what's most likely for you. And that's what's gotten the best outcomes.
So if you were to take a history of your journey of 30 years, this is 30 years, right, that you've dedicated yourself. Who has been the person that has most affected your outcome as to where you are today? Who has been your inspiration?
Well, you mean in terms of teachers?
Yeah, teachers or just individual, can be anybody. Who has influenced you to be who you are today? Influenced you the most to be who you are today?
Yeah, well, when it comes to teaching and my role model, my hero is Lee Hood. He was a professor at Caltech when I was an undergrad at Caltech. He was the one thinking about the future of biology. He's the one that developed the DNA sequencer. He's the one that developed the peptide sequencer and developed the peptide and oligosynthesizers. He's always been, and I mentioned this in the new book, he's always been a step ahead of everybody else. And so we fashion what we're doing based on what Lee taught me over the years. And then, of course, Bill Gates attracted Lee to come up to Washington, and he ultimately set up his own institute for Systems Biology. And he's always been looking at the future. Now, he's more on the research side. We've tried to take that research into the clinic and said, okay, if this research is correct, we should be able to heal people's brains. And fantastically, and it's so exciting to see. Yes, we see it again and again and again. We've had thousands now. We've treated over 10,000 patients. So we've got a lot of wonderful outcomes, and we still want to understand there are others that don't get good outcomes, and we want to understand why. Did they miss something? Did we miss something? Would they not do the right things? Were there additional things that were driving this? Did we get in too late? Is there a toxin we didn't recognize? Many, many issues. But the good news is, as I mentioned in our trial, the vast majority of people do very well. And the earlier you start, the easier it is.
I would almost guarantee you that the ones that don't do well are not as compliant with the daunting task of changing their habits. And there are some people who just, I hate to say it, but they're just lazy about, they know they have a condition, but they don't have that motivation like Judy does or
Yeah,
did
Judy's
to
motivated.
make, to really embrace the challenge and to rise to the opportunity to, improve their lives. And so I would bet you that it's more of that, like, just diet alone. Look at the creatures of habit,
Yeah,
and with nutrition, and people just have trouble making those changes. And you, by the way, I meant to ask you, you mentioned ketones, and I want to be
yeah.
sure our viewers understand what a ketone is. Can you just take a moment? I know we're going to have to end soon, but I don't want to miss that, because everybody, it misunderstands when you're on the keto diet. They think you're eating butter and steak every day and bacon, and that's not what you're talking about. I don't want people to go away thinking that's what they should go to the grocery store and start buying all these very bad processed foods. So could you just take a second to define a ketone?
Yeah. So, as you said, the diet is plant-rich, mildly ketogenic. Yes, have wild-caught fish. Yes, have some pastured chicken. Yes, have some grass-fed beef. Those are all great. Yes, have some pastured eggs. Great.
Yeah.
But you want to, it's a plant-rich. You want to have big vegetables, big salads, these sorts of, eat the rainbow sort of thing.
Right.
Because there's so many things that are helpful there.
And another thing we didn't talk about is intermittent fasting, because I know you and I are both doing that. I usually end my last meal around 7, and then I don't eat again. Like, I'll eat when we get off this podcast, so it'll be about, let's say, noon. So, I know you say 12 to 14 if you're ApoE. We'll talk about the genes real quickly in a moment, but so I think that's an important thing for people to know, that intermittent fasting produces the autophagy, which really is a way to get your blood sugar, your metabolic, and your insulin levels under control. So I wanted to be sure that we included that as another way that you can not only lose weight, or at least keep your current weight stable. But anyway, go ahead. I'm sorry.
So you're right. So you want to become insulin sensitive. As I mentioned earlier, your brain only functions on those two things, glucose or ketones. So ketones are made by your liver. It's a way for your liver to export energy to your brain. So it takes literally biochemical energy in the form of acetyl-CoA. It uses it to produce ketones, which then travel through your blood up to your brain and other organs. And then they are turned back into the energy, and they are burned with your mitochondria. And so it's a way to export and utilize energy. And so when you don't have enough glucose, when you are low, you're not eating, for example, you're sleeping. You will now make these things. And the problem is, if you don't have the glucose and you don't have the ketones, then your brain is sputtering. It's like a Prius that has no electricity and no fuel. You just can't go. And that's what we see with so many people who have cognitive changes. It's because they cannot utilize and make that energy. So we recommend, just at the beginning, just take some exogenous ketones while we're getting you into this metabolic flexibility. But people will notice when they get into it, oh my gosh, my brain is working so much better, and I've got more energy than before. That's the key.
And add to that list of, first cold press organic olive oil, avocados, things that are healthy fats. Get rid of those seed oils, which are really the omega-6s are killers too. There's so much. You know what? I was thinking with Gray Matters, it might be good to affiliate with some nutritional coaches that can take people right to the grocery store and help them, really physically buy the right things, instead of all being tempted by what typical grocery stores do, which is to tempt you into buying things that are not good for you. Well, I know they're going to end this. They're going to want me to end this now, but I wanted to be sure to say one last thing about the ApoE gene, ApoE4. Can you just quickly tell us what are the percentages of people that have ApoE4 positive and negative, because that is the main genetic that kind of predisposes you to Alzheimer's. Yes,
there are 100 different genes, but ApoE is the common one. And so If you have 0 copies, and that's 3/4 of our population, your lifetime risk for Alzheimer's is 9%.
Yeah.
So I'm an ApoE3/3, for example. I'm an ApoE4 negative.
Yeah.
It's not 0.
So am I, by the way.
Great, good to know.
Yeah, yeah.
Then if you have a single copy, that's 75 million Americans, most of whom don't know it. Your lifetime risk is 30%. So please check it out, get on active prevention. If you have 2 copies, and that's 7 million Americans, most of whom don't know it, your chance is about 90%. Most likely you will develop Alzheimer's. So again, find it. Julie G, who's ApoE4/4, and had symptoms back in her late 40s, is now in her 60s. She's been on a protocol for a long time. She's doing absolutely great. There's a wonderful website, apoe4.info, where you can get sorts of information. Most of the people on there are on some version of our protocol and doing very well. So that's a critical gene for all of us to find out. And by the way, it is in those RECODE labs that I mentioned earlier. You'll know your ApoE status and you can do something about it.
Yeah, so the RECODE, for everybody that's listening and watching, the RECODE is your protocol. That's what you developed out of all of this. And that's what the substance of what we've been talking about today, the causes of Alzheimer's and the protocol that will help to reverse Alzheimer's. So I just want to end on that note to say, you are a pioneer, and there are very few people that would have the courage to do what you've done, which is to embrace a system that is basically against you, but you're a fighter. You're like a David and Goliath. That's the metaphor. So I want to just applaud all your efforts and never give up, right? You're never going to, not after 30 years, they're certainly not going to go backwards. And you know that the results are there. So thank you so much, Dale, for being with us today and sharing all of this information. We could have talked for another hour, but maybe we'll have you back next year for round 2.
Sounds good. Thank you, Michele.
Okay, you take care. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.